reaction. American First, well, Action Senior Advisor Sean Spicer, The Hill's Joe Concha. You know, I'm watching this closely. We know what's coming. We know FISA is bigger. It sounds to me, Sean, like the Attorney General is being extraordinarily precise and careful and understanding the magnitude of what we're dealing with here. That would mean the biggest abuse of power corruption scandal in history, which we have been pointing out to be true for quite a long period of time now.
I think a lot of people have been waiting for this Horowitz report to come out because they've acknowledged that he's clearly a nonpartisan referee that was going to call balls and strikes on this. And for Comey to have this kind of damning report come down, if true, is a major blow to everything that he's been talking about, this higher than mighty, a higher loyalty, as his book was called, this idea that he did nothing wrong. This really blows not only the wind out of his sails, but really undermines the Democrats' arguments that they've been making and puts it very clearly that this president was targeted by the highest levels of law enforcement. That should trouble every single American. I've said this before, Sean. Donald Trump hits back better than anyone else. He's got the resources. But one of the things he always talks about is that he knows that he's the president. He's got money and he's got resources. He's been fighting for the little guy to make sure that doesn't happen to any other American. And that's what should worry people. He's got the resources. He knows how to fight better than anyone else. But when he fights out, when he speaks out and he fights on this issue, it's not just for him. It's for every other American that worries about the highest levels of government targeting them.
Big news, Joe Concha. And it seems, as I talk to my sources, what they're telling me tonight is that the Attorney General has taken all of it seriously. He's been, since he's taken this job, 15 steps further along than anybody knew. And that the issue of FISA in particular, Jim Comey, for example, has told us, we don't spy, okay? Well, in October of 2016, in spite of multiple warnings that Steele hated Trump, Hillary paid for a political document, that he didn't verify the dirty Russian dossier that even the New York Times recognizes was likely Russian disinformation from the beginning, used as the bulk of information to get the FISA warrant to spy on the president, the transition team, and then candidate Donald Trump. That would mean he signed documents to spy in spite of what he said. But it seems to me that the Attorney General is going to take this piece by piece, bit by bit, and he is going to go methodically, slowly, get to the bottom of it, and then I assume the word prosecution will be heard a lot more often. Your take?
Yeah, well, it's certainly a lot different than the previous Attorney General in Jeff Sessions in terms of the way Bill Barr has gone about his job from day one. I'm curious to see how the media will now cover this particular story by John Solomon, who's only been nominated for 4 Pulitzers. He's only won a George Polk Award. He has the resume, certainly. There's no reason to doubt his sources and what he's found here tonight. And all I could do, Sean, quite frankly, is think back to James Comey, media darling, who did hundreds of interviews, who sold more than 600,000 copies of his book in week 1, and nobody decided to really ask him any tough questions, and all they wanted to hear about was how horrible Donald Trump was to work for, and Comey got a free pass on anything that very easily could have been questioned at the time.
But if I'm right that this is going to, in the end, the fact that he had violated the Espionage Act. Now, it did put innocent people in, it did put people in jail before. Greg Jarrett mentioned a few cases, Christian Saucier, perhaps the most prominent case, and he decides not to prosecute. Well, that would mean we don't have equal justice or equal application of our laws. I suspect that the Attorney General, though, is thinking a longer play here, and that is, let's get to all of the facts before any decision is ultimately made, and for the time being, he would have the ability to go back on this and revisit whether or not this is worthy of prosecution. But compared to FISA abuse and probably the outsourcing of intelligence to circumvent American laws and a plot, a plan, and a scheme to undo an election and first, well, alter that election with lies, Russian disinformation, I think that would be more important. What's especially ironic is if the New York Times is right, Sean Spicer, that this was likely the dossier that Hillary paid for with Russian lies. This was likely Russian disinformation from the beginning. That tells me that the Russians were helping Hillary because they knew all along that that information was being used against Trump. That means the whole country has been lied to for 2.5 years about the Russians wanting to help Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Joe's point is well taken. How does the media cover this? Because they've bought into this narrative for so long, all of it. And as Joe pointed out correctly, I mean, they've treated Comey
Joe
like
loves
he
the
can
media.
do no wrong and everything. Huh? But I think that what we're going to see now is, do they even cover this? That's what I actually, it's not even will they cover it honestly. Will there be a story tomorrow based off John Solomon's reporting? There's no question he has the credentials
Doesn't matter.
when it comes to this kind of stuff. Will
I don't
they
think it
actually
matters.
cover it? I don't think so.
You're both right to raise the question, but at the end, it doesn't matter. Because if these people
Well, it does
violated
matter,
the
Sean,
law,
because
as I suspect they all did.
Shows.
What?
But it finally shows how dishonest they are, because if you can actually prove now that this inspector general that everybody agreed was the fair scorekeeper shows that Comey was the bad guy in this, if that's what's true and the media doesn't cover it, then they can't ever claim again that they're neutral.
Okay. In 2007, just pointing this out, I said journalism in America is dead. It's not dead on this show. That's all I'm going to say. Good to see you both. When we come back.